managed to. We're ready to move.
Okay, all welcome. Welcome to the Big Apple Film Festival. Today we're going to be talking about what networks and streamers are looking for with Shan Ray. If everyone can mute their microphones. It's going to be mostly a Q&A. So if you guys have questions or you want to tell Shan about your projects, he'd be glad to listen to you and give you advice. First I'll let him introduce himself a little bit, and then we can work with the question. You can either raise your hand with the emoji, or you can type it into the chat box, and I'll either forward the question or unmute you can unmute your mic and ask him yourself. So, okay, let's get started.
Great. Hi, everybody. I am a little under the weather, so I might be coughing intermittently. I apologize. But I'm a TV lit and international agent at the Gersh agency. I've been an agent, I think, 16 years at this point. From Northern California originally, came down for college at UCLA. I thought I was always wanted to go to med school. That was my plan. I'm Indian, so it's kind of predestined. I had the MCAT left and I didn't really want to do it anymore. I fell backwards into a job fair on campus and ended up out of the blue randomly getting an internship at MTV in 2000, back when MTV was super relevant and, you know, the channel to watch. And it was great. I was there 4 years. I did mainly talent management there. We booked and managed the celebrities for the VMAs, movie awards, and all the star-driven shows that we had back then. And then I pivoted because I was told by multiple people when I was trying to make a move to the next level that you needed some agency experience. So I Googled what the top 5 agencies were and started faxing my resume. Ended up getting into the mailroom in the trainee program at ICM, back when ICM was around, now part of CAA, and came up there, became a feature-lit agent there in 2008. And then the last big strike happened, really killed the feature business for a number of years. So I pivoted to television. I moved after a couple of years from there to a boutique TV lit agency called the Kaplan Stoller Agency, where I learned television, which is a wholly different business, and then moved over to Gersh about 7-8 years ago. And I've been here ever since.
Nice. So I know we're going to talk today about what networks and streamers are looking for. I'm sure at this strange time, I'm not sure they're looking for anything, or like what exactly is going on, and like and we can talk a little bit about that. But generally, what are networks looking for, and how can we jump on that opportunity to supply something for them?
Yeah, so I guess we could talk about network first, in the linear channels. You know, I think those brands are relatively staying the same. I mean, in the sense that CBS, whether or not you watch CBS on a daily basis, you know, you're talking about your procedurals, cop shows, legal shows, all procedural based, medical shows, anything like that. You know, that they would do those. They're the least versatile in that they do not stray out of their absolute core, I would say, middle America, you know, center state programming. And then you have ABC, which is much more the soapy genre when it comes to dramas. Soapy dramas, their procedurals need to be close-ended with, but can have bigger arcs. I think that also pertains to NBC, Blind Spot, Blacklist, things like that, where you have a week to week, but then there's a longer arcing story. And then what am I forgetting? Oh, Fox. And so Fox is, you know, they're looking for the high concept, splashy shows, but at the same time, you know, are playing, you know, they don't have a studio anymore. They're on their own. And they do also, though they say, and they want fresh and new, you know, they have shown to trend towards continuing to play it relatively safe. The only things they picked up from last year were Accused and Alert. They're losing 911 in a year or two because Disney's going to take it back and probably put it on ABC or Disney Plus. So then those are your networks. Streaming is a little more interesting. Streaming 10 years ago, they were buying everything. I had clients that would have a pitch, project they want to take out, and they'd say, well, it could be streaming or it could be network. All right, so we'll take it out in network and we'll take it out in streaming. That sometimes worked, like streaming would buy it even though network didn't. It has changed dramatically now, where streaming, you have to be elevated in some way. You can see a show and tell if it needs to be on streaming or not. And that means you can't just take a network show, add some swear words or some sex scenes or some gratuitous violence and make it a streaming show. It has to inherently be streaming. Why does it need to be there? The examples I use are shows like Girls, Game of Thrones, things like that. You couldn't make those shows on network. They would be awful. The thematics that the girls were exploring, you couldn't do that on network television, right? Game of Thrones inherently was an extremely violent show. And without that, that show can't survive. And so those are the kind of delineations that network that streaming has set up. Now, Netflix and Amazon, they are buying from many different departments. They have their, they have their serialized procedurals, they have their rom-coms, they have all these different kinds of shows. But in the end of the day, there's got to be a reason to be on streaming. Amazon in particular has now bifurcated into Amazon and Freevee. It's an awful name for a channel, but it is what it is. I don't know who they pay to make up these freeform and Freevee words. It's awful. But anyway, Freevee is kind of there now, network, elevated network, network plus, as they say. So, Bosch, which was originally on Paramount, on Amazon, has moved over there. But it's at its core, it's a procedural. So they're looking for other things like that. It's network, elevated network. And Netflix is starting to do, there is subdivisions that are looking for those things now. But again, it has to be, an elevated version of network in streaming. You've got your Peacocks that are also doing that kind of stuff, and things like that. So that's kind of the landscape. I think I always tell people you can't chase what is hot right now, because by the time that show ever gets made, it's probably passed us by. And so things that do tend to hit the zeitgeist is pure luck. You can't go chasing the zeitgeist with an idea. Just things that happen, you're like, oh my gosh, because it gets made, it takes 6-8 months, then they're going to release it. Say you make a show about a Succession type show about a company that is in crypto and absolutely crashes, and all these famous people lose all their money. When that show comes out and then FTX happens, oh wow, it's right there, it happens to come out. But you can't chase FTX right now. Like, I'm going to pitch an FTX project in 9 months from now, so it's old news by now, right? So you can't chase it. You can just try to give the audience something that's great. Great is the first thing anyone and everyone should be chasing towards, is something great idea, great execution, great characters, great worlds.
But you get mandates. I've been hearing about people getting like each of the network putting out their mandates of what they're looking for. Like, I guess they kind of change every 3 or 4 months. They'll come up with a new list. Is this still relevant, or is that?
It is relevant, unfortunately, our business, and this is just a little bit of, when you agent long enough, you become hyper cynical. And I find most of those mandates that are on that sheet just happen to be something that the head of the company said at their staff meeting on that Wednesday. And so they add it to the mandates, and then you hear the mandate, like, oh my gosh, I got the perfect one. And then you send it, they're like, no, we're not really looking for this. And you're like, you just said you were looking for this. So I think you are right, Andy. They do have mandates. Our covering agents put those mandates out quarterly or 6 or 8 months. But those are constantly in flux and are so loose. Even though they might put it there, it's like, well, what exactly kind of heightened two-hander cop procedural are you looking for? Well, we won't know until we see it, right? So they don't know what they're looking for. If they did, they'd write it themselves, right? So you got to come in. You got to come in with those auspices. You got to come in with the right take, with that, whether it's a big actor or a big writer director that people want to work with or whatever, or a producer, Jerry Bruckheimer or Aaron Kaplan or Craig Berlanti, that the studio's like, well, this is undeniable. So there are mandates as well, always, but again, chasing mandates is, I don't know, a fool's game in my opinion sometimes.
Okay. But it sounds like we should be writing, if we, like with whether it's streaming or network, we should know beforehand going in, so we don't, so we kind of know where we want to take our projects. Like, we don't want to put act breaks in something. We don't want to have to set up act breaks if we're not going to go to network. Is that something that we should be thinking about?
For sure. I think structure is, in this day and age, a little looser than it used to be. I think if you're doing comedy, figuring out, the structure is so widely different between multicam and single cam. Yes, for sure. Act breaks, you can build in, but those are some you can just in your mind just take those out, right? You can just continue to flow through. And even, I'm watching Hijack right now on Apple, which is actually really good. I can see where the act breaks would be if you had commercials. So I don't think it's as much act breaks, but yes, Andy, I do agree with you, but I do think that's a great question, in that you do need to, when coming up with an idea and what you're doing with it, really know that idea and know where it lives. Can't be wishy-washy. If you're even slightly wishy-washy, they will know that you're wishy-washy from looking at the idea. That it's like, oh, this could be both, and then it'll be none. Any idea that could work in both will be none. They will not buy it, neither one. It'll be slightly too edgy for network. It'll be not edgy. It'll be too vanilla for streaming. And so what you really need to be is decisive about what your show is and where it lives. And I would say, especially in streaming, even more, but either way now more than ever, but streaming ideas are more nuanced, is that it has to come from a very authentic place, one way or another, for better or worse. I'm a big believer that men can write female characters and vice versa. I think, a white person can write diverse voices, and vice versa. If the show was to ever go, you'd put a room together, a writer's room, where you would get authentic voices to really speak to those characters, of course. But we are living in a very hypersensitive time right now. And so I would say it would be very difficult. I can never say never, but it would be highly difficult for a white writer to sell an indigenous story about Native Americans right now, or a white person or a black person to sell a story set in Japan with Japanese characters. I'm just, you get what I'm saying, or, an LGBTQ story from a straight person, because, the internet and everything, they will absolutely tear that show down before it even gets a chance to show that it is actually really good, if you're not writing from an authentic place. So really, I'm not saying, for anyone here that happens to be Caucasian, I'm just saying, I gotta then only write, but keep that in mind. Number one is, and it's got to come from a very authentic place. And number two, you can't just know what the pilot is, especially in streaming. Their question is going to be, where does the show end? How many episodes are you going to need to tell the finite story that you want to tell? And if your question is, well, this could go on forever, streaming is going to be like, well, that's not what we're looking for, right? Netflix also, because their financials, they won't admit it, but they rarely let a show go past season 3. because the financials for them on the payout on the back ends, on the new back end structure, are so massive after 3 years that most shows don't go past 3, even if they're doing really well. And so, no, I'm not saying to make a show that's only 3 seasons, but what I'm saying is they're going to want to know. It's not like we'll figure it out where this the great pilot, right? They're like, we love the pilot, we love everything about this. Where do they go? Like, we'll figure it out. You can't do the story of David Lindelof. I don't know if you guys heard it, but he wrote the pilot of Lost and had no idea what happens in episode 2. And when they put the room together, he had a nervous breakdown, and they actually shut down the room for 2 weeks because he didn't know what to do next. And then Carlton Hughes came in and they put a room together and they figured it out, and the show was, a huge hit. And it doesn't fly anymore. They need to know exactly how much they're in for financially. They need to know that the story is worth telling, all those kinds of things. It's a lot of talking for your question, Andy, but.
That's fine. So do you, like, during this period, are you reading scripts? Are you looking at pitch decks? Are you seeing things from writers? Or is this kind of a time that, I'm trying to kind of frame what writers should be doing right now, since we can't really try to sell anything.
I mean, for our clients, my clients in particular, we've told everyone, like, I mean, you've got to be doing something. You got to be writing, or you got to be coming up with a pitch. I mean, from what I'm hearing from all the studios that we're talking to, it's not going to be a absolute feeding frenzy like post strikes coming out of post strike, of a need for a gigantic amount of content. And that's twofold. One, because in network, which is the highest consumer of buying content on a year-to-year basis, they're just not in that model anymore of the traditional network buying season, of buying a ton of ideas, having everyone go write scripts. Then of those 30 ideas, they like 10 scripts or 8 scripts, and they make those into pilots, and then they pick 3 to put on the air. They're doing much more year round, so there's things in the coffers the whole time. Secondly, this strike was so inevitable that most the networks and studios, network and streaming, got wise to it. And so whereas in past years, writers got a kind of a summer vacation from March to like July before the next season started. I represent the co-creator of NCIS Hawaii. A week after finishing, they hadn't actually finished the previous season. They started the room up for the next season. So they've got 8 or 9 episodes already written of that show before the strike happened. All that said, there will be a need for material regardless, whether it's as high as in previous years. So every one of my clients are expected to have something out of the gates. They should have a script that we're taking out, or a pitch that we'll be taking out. To show you're relevant, you're working, you're going at it, and or let's go sell something. I think it is going to trend towards or tilt slightly towards the bull market, at least slightly, post strike. Now, when that is, who knows? But the streamers, they do have. I think Netflix over exaggerates how much they have in the can ready to be released, but they do make a lot and don't release them when they're ready. I represent also Simon Barry, who created Warrior Nun on Netflix, and that show didn't premiere, and the show premiered a year after they finished it. So they do have a lot ready in the wings to go. But to answer your question, yes, everyone should be writing. Everyone should be coming up with pitches to go out to the marketplace.
And as far as pitches go, how can we get to pitch to, for emerging writers to be able to pitch to representation? Is there?
Andy and I have been doing this a while, and he knows that I drop truth bombs for better or worse, but I feel like no one here is benefited by me sugarcoating how this all works. And truth is, representatives don't look at pitch decks in considering clients usually. And unsolicited is very difficult legally on top of the volume that come into my inbox on a daily basis. The legality of it for anyone that hasn't listened to one of my seminars before is that, say you send me a pitch deck or a script, unsolicited email, I said, and I read it and I email, I was like, hey, this is really good, I like it. But I'm not really ready to take on a new client right now. And then 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later, because linear thought is a real thing in our business, one of my existing clients pitches a very similar idea. And he's a client and I'm responsible for taking his material out. We take it out, we sell it. And then you call and say, hey, that's really close to my idea. And you read my script. Now you could sue. You have a potential. I'm not saying anybody here is not upstanding and would do that, but there is that issue. So getting representation to take something out is a little difficult. For an agent, maybe a manager, I would say focus on your relationships, focus on your other writer friends that maybe have a relationship, or an assistant at a production company, or an assistant at a studio that will take a look at it and maybe say, wow, this is kind of good. Maybe put it, say they're the assistant to a creative executive at ABC, and maybe they're able to, they have the juice from their boss, put it into their script coverage department, and it goes in and gets good script coverage at ABC. Okay, then maybe the exec's going to look at it. Maybe they'll send it to a couple of their pods that, the production companies that they have overall deals with. Maybe that exec will call an agent friend like me and say, hey, dude, I don't think this is right for ABC, but this is pretty good. My assistant had me read it. That's how it works, right? That's how things come across my desk. People that I know call and say, hey, I saw something that's great. I'm not going to lie to you. I've had friends, and agents don't have as many friends at other agencies unless you've been doing it long enough and have moved around and other people move. But I've had friends at really other big agencies call me and say, hey, this is great. I can't sign them right now because of politics. We should check it out. I'm going to take a look at that. I've had references from CA, WME, UTA, we all pass stuff around, but that's the way to get things looked at. The idea of sending things unsolicited to representatives, and I don't want to discourage anyone from doing it, but at the same time, it's a complete waste of time. Just because I'm being very honest, like you can't. Not only is there the legal issue, but I get 30 to 50 a day, and so what I try, not to go on and on, but I think this is a good point, Andy, which is relationships in this business is key. And all of you guys that are on here, I think all want to be writers. I don't say it like that. You all want to be writers, not like it's impossible. But what I'm saying is, don't get myopic on the end goal. In this business, you got to have micro and macro goals, right? And every step into the business is one more step to your macro goals. And what I mean by that is, get in a writers group, find other like-minded writers that you can start a group together. Every week you read somebody's script in that group, you give notes, and you start to make everyone's content better. What happens with those writers groups? Someone will get a PA job or a writer assistant job on a show, or an assistant job at a studio. And then in 6 months or a year, they'll get promoted. And they have to find a friend to take over that job so their boss knows that they left them in good standing. They'll probably ask one of you guys. And that's to get a foot in the door. If you're an assistant at a studio, management company, agency, on set, what does that offer you? That offers you access to other people. You make friends, you do a good job. Those people will remember you. And then that's how I got in the agency business. The agency business was because when I was doing talent management, there was one publicist everyone hated that I got along with. She had huge clients. One of them was Ben Stiller. And he's a really odd dude, but I took care of whatever he needed. And after 2 or 3 shows at the end of the VMAs, we're waiting for his car to pull up, and he asked me what I want to do. And at the time I said I wanted to be a producer. And he's like, all right, I'll set you up at Red Hour, his company. I go in, he true to his word, he got me a meeting at Red Hour. And that's when his partner said, you're great, but you need to start an agency. So then I started sending my resume to agencies. And that's, those are the people that can advise you. Those are the relationships you need. So to get your pitch deck, I know this is a long, grueling process. but it's not easy. There's no clear path to the top in this business. Unfortunately, when I was going to med school, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I need to go to college, I need to go to med school, I need to pass the boards, and I'm a doctor. And whether you're a podiatrist or a brain surgeon, you've all made it, right, to Olympus. You all get the doctor in front of your name. You might make different amounts of money. There's no clear path in this business, unfortunately. And it's those relationships that carry you through to get yourself, at the start with those relationships to get find like-minded people, but get your pitch in front of a friend who can then give it to another friend if it's great, right? Everyone that puts themselves out are not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. It's got to be great material. But if you're giving someone great material, they're going to pass it on to the next level. And that's how people get found too. Early in my career, I got pulled short straw. I had to go to this thing called the CBS Diversity Showcase. It's an actor showcase, mainly of diverse actors, LGBTQ and diverse. And there was one actor there that just stood out. I mean, just stood out among the rest. And these are all no names. And afterwards, I went up to that person and said, I don't do talent, but you're amazing. She was like, thank you so much. 2 weeks later, the head of that showcase got a call from Lorne Michaels and said, I heard you have my next cast member. And the week after that, Kate McKinnon joined Saturday Night Live. And it was Kate McKinnon. Like, she was a nobody. Like, she just happened to be in that showcase. But cream rises to the top. And you will get noticed if you're the best writer in your group or the best, actor in that area. So you will get found if you're doing the best work.
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about networking over the couple of panels that we've done. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of like not just, we have a thing here at Big Apple where in your packet, in your email, there's form to fill out that you can tell everybody about your project, and they're going to send an email. And we'll group everyone together. So all of you here can actually start interacting with each other, which is, kind of, it's how I got my start. Was, just happened to be networking at the Austin Film Festival and met a writer. And, now I have, 3 features and a web series that I've done. And it's all just from the networking. Sure, I wrote a lot of stuff, but it was the contacts I made over the years that have kind of taken me to this level that I'm at now. So did anyone have any questions at all? I mean, it's a great opportunity to talk to an agent directly. Stanton, did you want to unmute and ask a question?
I didn't realize I had to unmute here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, very nice. Thank you for being here.
I'm listening, by the way. Hold on one second.
Sure.
So sorry. Go ahead.
I was recently hired to write a TV pilot script based on a historical novel that has a Black protagonist. I'm white, and the author of the novel is also white. Is there anything we can do in terms of attaching Black talent, such as a Black showrunner, Black director, at this point, so that we're not dead in the water pitching it as 2 white writers?
I mean, you could. I'm actually not dealing with, but I have something very in that world, which is I represent a writer and author named Kevin Hazard, who wrote a book that came out at the end of last year called American Sirens. He's a former EMT. He's a white writer. He's a former EMT out of Atlanta. But the book he wrote an article about this first in the Atavist magazine, and then expanded it into in a full nonfiction book called American Sirens about the advent of EMTs. And the first EMT team was all composed of African Americans in Pittsburgh. And then once it became finally mainstream, of course, they got rid of all of them and hired white people, and they were hidden figures, as it were. That book did really well at the end of last year, and there was a lot of interest in the marketplace, and we ended up deciding to go with Kevin's going to write it, but we need to help. I want Kevin to write the screenplay, but we're trying to figure that out. So we ended up, after all the interest, going with Malcolm D. Lee, who's African-American director and creator, who has a deal at Universal. And we're looking to possibly put on or attach a African-American showrunner, supervisor to either supervise or co-write. up to them, and then this all came together right before the strike, so we haven't been able to engage in writers yet, but that's our next step.
Yes.
So the two things I would say to you is you could either go and try to attach someone. If you said that you've been hired to do it, if there's a production company involved, maybe they could be concurrently doing it while you're breaking the pilot, and then see if if let me give you a scenario. If you do end up finding someone, you can't just add it. You could just add an African American for adding someone of color to it. The most valuable is someone of note or someone with the credits as well. It doesn't have to be a showrunner and the biggest creator in the marketplace right now. It doesn't need to be Tyler Perry. It doesn't need to be one of those people, but that could be great. But you could also, if that person was interested in engaging, you're going to have to show them something. So you can show them the book, but you would, I wouldn't wait on starting to break out at least the pilot and what you think that could look like.
Yes.
Conversely, I was just going to say, conversely, you could also write it and then present that script with the book.
Yes.
To, when you take it out to attach. But I would highly recommend adding something to that gives it that authenticity at a certain point. Whether it needs to be now or later is up to what your resources allow.
So do you mean an attachment of a showrunner, director, producer?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ray.
Yep. Sean, please. Thank you.
And is that something you can be doing now, looking to attach talent to your projects, or is that, are you allowed to approach actors at this point, or is that also?
Not really. I mean, you can, there's no money involved, there's no job. If you're able to get to them, sure. But the WGA has been pretty hardcore about us and what we're allowed to do. Now we can share things with our clients. We have a really robust book department. We have a great book. We can send it to a client of ours to check out. We're not trying to sell anything, but we can't submit our writers to the studios. We can't be saying, "Hey, read our clients," which is ridiculous in my opinion, because the WGA in the end wants their rank and file working, and why not have your representatives working while you can? But they've been really difficult on us in sending things to clients, and really actively doing that, except for our international clients. But yes, I would say don't get hung up on not proceeding with developing this idea out until you get someone. Because you could, you have a book, and if the idea is very execution driven, someone could say it's a great book, but I don't know what the show is, and I'm not really comfortable attaching. But if you show them a pilot that's really phenomenal, they'll be like, wow, that's really great. There's some things I would change, but this is a really great idea. I'd like to be involved in this. And maybe that's, you're closer to getting somebody to attach.
Thank you.
And then Steve would like to share a little bit about his series that he's been working on.
Hey, Sean. So this is a series about, I was going to say a 5-season series, but no, it's 3 seasons. It's just 3 seasons. But it's a boy in Terezin concentration camp discovers he has the power to bring the Golem of Prague back to life to help him and his friends fight the Nazis. So Terezin is this very, very spooky, awesome place in Prague, north of Prague, and it was built as a fortress, a walled fortress, and so it's like time left it behind, and so it's great for just sort of supernatural themes. And it may seem like I'm jumping on the bandwagon of Stranger Things. I'm so naive and uninformed around TV. I didn't even know what Stranger Things was until I started writing the series, and then looked at it and was like, oh yeah, right. So it's, in terms of comps, it's sort of that, but it's just a world unto itself. So I don't know.
No, absolutely. I mean, Stranger Things can't go on forever. and it is an outlier in Netflix, right? How long that show's been on, but it's huge. But all those actors are getting older, and we represent quite a few of them. And I don't, it can't go on forever. And so there's always going to be the next thing. It's a great comp to have. People are always looking for the next Stranger Things. And that's a really high concept idea, which is really cool. And they're looking for those things that you can make at a price, and yours would, inherently is set. I mean, there's shows that take place in New York, that are shot in Prague, but you could actually shoot that in Eastern Europe and have the right look for it. But I think all of that is really promising. I would say, Steve, the one red flag that is for every representative, and of course, when I say it, you're going to be like, well, and we say it when the networks say this to us, which is the top 10 shows across network and television are all period pieces. But it's very difficult to do period right now, or sell period.
And is period, so the 30s is period?
The 90s are period.
That was my other question.
It's unfortunate. I mean, again, it's not, but that's what they'll say. Wow, that's period. It's like, no, it's not. I mean, and how much, Mad Men was period, right? But there really wasn't much period to it except the set design. That was all internal, right? They went out, they had exterior shots on the street. They only had to shoot that once or twice and use different cars. But I'm sorry, there's some kind of alarm going off upstairs my house. I think if you can hear it, I apologize. But anyway, so there's ways to get around it. And so I'm not saying don't do it, but that's always the one thing that they'll be like, oh, period, we got a lot.
So like approaching somebody like Levy, who's been wildly successful around Stranger Things, is that the person to try to get interested, or is it more likely that somebody who's like made a fortune and made a very nice career around Stranger Things, like, been there, done that, not really wanting to retread?
Yeah, those people, you don't want to go to the exact, everyone wants the next Stranger Things. They don't necessarily want the Stranger Things guys. I can't imagine will do their next show anywhere near that genre. Yeah. Because if you get pigeonholed, you're done, right? That's the only, one trick pony. And no one wants to get pigeonholed into being a one trick pony. That's why, they've absolutely failed with Benioff and Weiss after Game of Thrones. They haven't done anything anywhere near or wanting to get close to Game of Thrones. They tried to do the Confederacy, and then they absolutely got annihilated, to my point earlier, because that was about a slave. It's based on the famous book. I think it's Colson Whitehead book, trying to escape the South. Like then they tore them apart. They're like, why is Benioff and Weiss doing the story? Then the only thing they did was the Amanda Peet show, and The Chair. But so I wouldn't go to them. I would go to the Berlantes, the Bruckheimers, the people that have the juice to go to any producer looking for it. A producer of Stranger Things wasn't producer of Stranger Things, so they made Stranger Things. Before that, they were just a producer, and then they blow up.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Sean.
No problem.
And Hecate, they're up in Canada.
Andy, would you hold on a second? It's actually driving me bonkers. If you guys can maybe talk for a second, come up with a question. I'll be back in 10 seconds.
Okay. Hecate, did you want to ask about opportunities coming from Canada?
We can hear you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Just want to wait.
Okay.
No, I was going to say, yeah, I'm going to let you ask the question when he comes back, if you're ready, unless you want me to just ask.
So how did you do with cyst?
So,
Sorry,
okay.
you couldn't hear it, but it was driving me absolutely insane. My kids set an alarm in their room. Go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah, we had a question from the Canadian contingent, Hecate, and they want to know a little bit about networking from Canada, I guess. Go ahead.
The networks in Canada or networking, like we were talking about meeting people.
You have any good ideas for who to build relationships with in Canada?
I mean, Canada is really strong right now as a marketplace, both as a locale or location that American studios are going to shoot because of the tax breaks. Canadian acquisitions, you know, there's quite a few shows that have over the years migrated from Canada over here to the various networks. We have quite a few really prominent showrunners that we represent in Canada. And so networking in Canada, I think, you know, Toronto is a big hub, right? Vancouver and Toronto. I love Toronto, by the way. You know, I think that, you know, just trying to figure, you know, I just networking wise, I would just say, try to get in and see if you can wiggle your way into, you know, I don't know exactly how unions work and how hiring happens on these shows. But again, to my, you know, the point of, you know, you want to be a writer, of course, you want to be a creator, but my last 3 assistants have all been writers. And so they, you know, they work for me for a year and a half. And then you know, I asked them to give me a year, at least a year and a half, and I will support them for life. And if they're good writers, you know, they've become clients. One of my best assistants went off to be a writer with a partner, actually was my colleague's assistant. They were best friends and they left, they went to become writers. One of them got a writer's assistant job on a show. Another one got a job as they were continuing to write together, got an assistant job at a production company. And then they wrote something great, but we took them on as clients, because we love them, but we were submitting their stuff over there. And then they got a job on CSI. There was their first staffing job. And then we moved them from CSI last season to Wednesday, which is huge. I mean, that show is gigantic. And now that they're story editors on Wednesday. And so that all came from being in the agency. And every time I call an executive, my assistant is I'm going off on a tangent, but I want to give you an example, which is that using one job to benefit you, which is if I call the head of Paramount, my assistant calls for me and she speaks to their assistant, and then I jump on the phone when the executive gets on the phone. But now my assistant's met that assistant, and then he might, you know, send them an email like, "Hey, you want to grab a drink sometime?" "Yeah, sure." And all of a sudden they'll grab a drink, they'll hit it off, and all of a sudden now you're friends with the assistant to the head of development at Paramount. And so then that assistant, if he or she's working for that person, probably really good, probably going to get promoted, and now you got a friend there, you know, and that is how it goes. And so to your point in Toronto, like whether it's getting on set somehow, being a PA, being the guy that holds the mic boom, whoever, you're on set 12 hours a day and you know how shooting a show goes. It's 99% downtime. What happens in downtime? People just talk and hang out. So you just put yourself in you got to put yourself in a place to win, if that makes sense, right? Just surround yourself with every opportunity to meet people. You can't hope to meet someone, you know, just, you know, you got to put yourself out there, put yourself in a place where there's a high volume of people and you don't know where that person is, right? That's why I've always, I mean, this comes from my parents as well, but I say hello to everyone I come across, whether it's the parking attendant in my building, the guy taking out the trash at night. I say hello, I try to remember their name. And I you know, fate's a weird thing. That guy that's picking up my trash today could be all of a sudden a very important person, you know, and you don't know. And so the more people you know, the more people you're good to, the more people you can do a good job for, those people remember you. I remember every great assistant I've ever had. Now there's not that many, but that were good. Not that I've had a lot of assistants, but I've had assistants from 10 years ago that will drop me an email and say, "Hey, how are you? I'm up for this job. Can you put a call in?" my next phone call, I'm calling that executive saying, hey, this person's great. I'm guaranteeing this person's great. You should hire them. You know, those are the kind of relationships that you need to foster. And whether it's in Toronto, whether it's in LA or New York or wherever, there are opportunities. Just surround yourself, put yourself in the mix.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Steve, did you want to follow up the question?
Yeah, so Sean, I have to assume though that when you say, you know, give me a year, be my assistant, that just like the writing world, the supply is high. So like I'm in a position where I'm in a second career writing, and I have the luxury of being able to, like, I've done this with Broadway producers, to say, like, I'll volunteer on a Broadway show and I have a lot of skills. I can take out the trash and I can talk to money people. So I want to give you this great value for free to build the relationship. Does that kind of thing exist in LA? Because I imagine if you were looking for an assistant as a paid position, I mean, you've got to line out the door just like everybody else, right?
Yes, I mean, supply always does outstrip demand. You know, the entertainment business, for better or worse, is not as sexy as it was 20 years ago. I mean, what tech is now is what entertainment was. You know, when I got to the mailroom at ICM, I was down there with JDs from Harvard and MBAs from Stanford and all these guys. And one guy's dad was the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch. Another guy was a massive real estate, corporate real estate mogul in New York, and just super rich kids. And they could have done anything, and they wanted to get in entertainment because it was cool, it was fun. You know, and that's who I had to compete against with a bachelor's degree from UCLA. But like, you're not getting as that kind of that. There is the inherent, I'm not going to lie, it's not the easiest job. I mean, I treat my assistants very well, and it's no longer the entourage Ari Lloyd relationship, but you know, it can get rough. And so we tend to get the kids right out of college that don't know any better, as opposed to people that might hit us back. I don't throw things, and no one throws things anymore. I had things thrown at me when I was an assistant, but that doesn't happen anymore. But yes, the line's out the door. But what you're saying about just volunteering, that's what I'm talking about. Just put yourself out there, just meet people. You do a good job. You can go in day one and say, hey, I know I'm here to pick up trash and I'm happy to do it, but I got a screenplay, will you read it? Or you are literally the best person at picking up trash at that Broadway show, and you were always the first one to raise your hand when something else needed to be done. And you were Johnny on the spot, and you were the guy that in the end they counted on day in, day out for that show to run. And at the end of that run, you say, hey, by the way, it was a pleasure working here. If you're ever open to reading something, I'd love to send you something. The guy's going to be like, dude, you're awesome. Of course I'll read it, right? So you do that job wherever you're given that opportunity and do the best job you can, and people will remember you. I really believe that. I mean, I do.
And then kind of referring back to
I'm sorry, Steve, does that answer your question at all? Is, you know, the supply and demand is, yes, there are a lot of kids coming out of college.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's just
Okay.
always, you know, when you're a volunteer, then it's a little bit of like, well, are you worthwhile if you're not charging anything? You don't want to, like, you know, remove all sense of dignity. And plus you're also dealing with the age thing, right? I mean, I think we've moved a little bit in a better direction as a society, but it's still a very superficial, you know, industry.
Absolutely.
And
I hate it. It's awful, but it is in that world. For you, I would say in your second career, I think it would just, you know, focus on finding writers, finding a group that, you know, and that age doesn't really matter, right? That's why I trended towards representing writers. I do represent some directors, but writing's always I've been most comfortable with, because a director needs someone to give them money to direct, right? Or an opportunity to direct. Either you're going to spend your own money, and a studio needs to hire you to direct an episode, right? Even if you're great and somehow you've lost the pizzazz and they've moved on to other people, you're still a great director, but someone needs to give you opportunity. I feel like you could be gone for 10 years as a writer, But every time you put pen to paper, you could reinvent yourself. All of a sudden, they're like, this is amazing. Who is it? Oh, he hasn't written in 10 years, but this is amazing. You could sell that. Like, and so ageism when it comes to writers and recreating content is not as much there.
When David Seidler won the Oscar for the King's Speech, it was like
Exactly.
awesome. Like, and he said so.
Yeah.
Like everybody that's out there over 60, like you can still do this.
Right. 100%. It was a great moment. Sorry, Andy, what were we saying?
I was going to ask about networking and the Toronto Film Festival. I was thinking of going up this year, but during the fact that there's a strike going on, is it going to be a different type of film fest, like these bigger film festivals? Are they worth going to this year as opposed to other years?
It's a good question. I don't know. I haven't been to TIFF just because I've been in TV for so long, mainly a film festival. It's always been a robust festival. We always have multiple agents going. I don't know how they're going to handle it this year because they premiere a lot of movies, but that goes hat in hand with the talent showing up and doing publicity and doing interviews and doing all that stuff to hype the movie, because it does cost those studios a lot of money to put the movie up in a big way at those festivals. And if your talent isn't coming to show up, which SAG actors will not, if they're still on strike, show up, I don't know I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to keep it and just keep it as a market for independent film? Maybe. But that's one of the really big ones. And so, it costs a lot of money. So it will be interesting. I mean, those film festivals, I on the TV side, I go to MIPCOM twice a year. We're going in October. That's a big festival in Cannes for television. You have the glitz and glamour of the premieres of the premiere TV shows. In April, they premiered Dead Ringers with, Rachel Weisz was there, and Silo premiered there, and Rebecca Ferguson was there. But that's not what I'm doing. So the business, for me, you've got the market is there as well. So I think, to answer your question, it just depends on why you're going there. If you're going to network with creatives, I think there will be a diminishment in the number of creatives. That's my guess, that will be there due to the labor issues. If you're going there to do business, I can see the companies still showing up. Those companies that are either selling independent content, are selling foreign content for remake rights or tape, in different countries, to bring those people together, all those other things that happen at those big festivals. That if you're going for that business, I can imagine that part of it will still stay and be robust. So it just depends on why you're going.
Okay. All right, well, it looks like it's almost time to wrap up. Anyone have any last question, or did Sean, you would just leave us with more words of wisdom you can leave us with?
I think we touched on a lot of things I'd like to end with, but to reiterate, it's just, you guys all keep striving. I really am a true believer in that. Every time you write, you get better. Don't write something and be like, well, there it is. There's my Romeo and Juliet. I'm done. I'm done. I'm going to be remembered forever. You finish a script. Don't get bogged down in the last 10 pages. Just finish it with some words, even if it's gibberish. Put it aside and start writing your next idea. Come back to that script a month later and finish it. Don't get hung up, because I truly believe every time you write, it inherently gets better. The second script might not be as good as the first script, but you learn how to pay off a MacGuffin better the second time around. You know how to hide your main character's ulterior agenda in a drama better. You know how to pay off a joke in the first act, again in the third act, and use it again and do a callback better. All these things happen by, I call it practice, but that sounds like I'm, just, talking down to you. It's not that. I'm just saying, the more you write, the more you go. This business is all about what you've done lately, not what have you done. The clients I've had clients and still have a few, and I'm not going to say names, like, they're like, okay, well, can I get this job? I'm like, or can we take this script out? I was like, we've taken that script out before. They're like, oh, I know, but It's really great. Can we take it out again? You can't just sit on one script and think you're going to make it big on that. You need to continue to generate content, generate material. So you have different kinds of scripts. You know, if you're ever planning on staffing, you know, have a procedural, have a serialized drama, have all these different kinds of things. Flex those muscles. You never know you're going to need at the times that you're going to need it. That's number one. Number two, just reiterate the point I made before, which is, I know you all want to be writers, but don't sleep on an opportunity. I tell every assistant of mine that. Big or small, what is 1 year out of your life? Just do something, even if it doesn't pan out or it doesn't lead to millions of dollars and you becoming big time. You did meet people, you made relationships, you made connections that'll benefit you in the long run. Don't overthink any opportunity. Just jump on an opportunity that comes your way. You never know where it's going to go. I'm a big believer in that. Don't sleep on opportunities. Grab it. Live a culture of yes. Say yes more often than no, and see where it leads you. But yeah, I wish you guys all the best of luck. And you know, I have the utmost respect for creatives, writers, directors, actors, because it's a lifetime of no. So you get that yes. I don't have the stomach for it, but I have the utmost respect and admiration for all of you guys to do it, because it's not an easy road, but it is attainable. You know, if you do great work, and you guys all seem like people that are doing great stuff, and I just wish you all the best of luck.
Thanks so much. Great day. And that should wrap it up.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.